10. Hard rejection. Two people worked together at a restaurant in Miami Beach. One of them was Delphina Pon, 28 years old. The other was 20-year-old Lucas Mariani. But there was more going on here than just serving drinks and making tips. Lucas continually tried starting a relationship with Delphina, and she continued to refuse him. The entire restaurant was filled with the stench of desperation, awkwardness, and cheap margaritas. But Lucas didn't take rejection very well. According to the police report, when Delphina left the restaurant on November 29th after her shift, Lucas followed a short time later. He left in the middle of his own shift, tracked Delphina to her home, and tried desperately to get inside her apartment. This was when everything turned deadly. Delphina wouldn't let him inside. She refused to even speak with him about his proposal for a relationship, and she told him to get lost. He was a creep, and a desperate one at that. He became so desperate in the end as she tried to make him leave that he pulled a knife and stabbed her. He stabbed her again and again until she was dead, and then he turned the knife on himself. A neighbor witnessed the whole thing and called the cops. When they arrived, they found Lucas lying on top of Delphina in a pool of blood. Both were rushed to the hospital, where Delphina died, and her assailant miraculously survived. 9. Blood and beer. In August of 2010, early in the morning on the Tuesday shift at Hartford Distributors, a disgruntled employee showed up and started shooting. His name was Omar S. Thornton, an employee of the beer distributorship in Connecticut. He was responsible for killing at least 8 of his co-workers. It all began when Omar was given the opportunity to either quit or be terminated. He had a disciplinary hearing with a union representative, and it didn't go over too well. Whatever Omar had been doing at work, it was serious enough that they were done with him. But instead of quitting and walking out peacefully, Omar chose to be terminated. He was in the middle of being escorted out of the office building when he suddenly turned and started shooting. According to one of the witnesses, John Hollis of the Connecticut Teamsters Union, the shooting was indiscriminate. Omar had previously complained to his family about being racially harassed at work, with some of his coworkers even joking about hanging him like it was 1872. The morning of the killing, he phoned his mother and apologized for what he had done. He even said goodbye. That was after Omar had already stormed through the offices and shot every single person that he could find for 45 straight minutes. 8. Death at a furniture plant. Murder erupted at a North Carolina furniture plant after a silly argument spiraled out of control. The argument was between Tangela Parker and Felicia Marlowe. On January 13th, the two women got into a fight about moving tables at TCS Designs where they worked. When the Hickory police arrived and found Felicia dead from a gunshot wound, Tangela was already long gone. She fled the scene, hooked up with her husband, and they fled as quickly as they could. According to Felicia's husband, it wasn't even that big of a shock that Tangela resorted to murder. His wife had previously complained about Tangela being a bully. She had even filed a complaint with management after Tangela screamed in her face. It took 6 months for the United States Marshals to finally arrest the couple on the run. They tracked them all the way from the furniture plant in North Carolina to Phoenix, Arizona. They were hiding and living under aliases. They were so serious about dropping off the grid that they were surviving by begging for money on the street and panhandling. They even lived out of their Honda CR-V after changing its license plate to evade the cops. Alas, all that work didn't really pay off. They got to spend 6 months as beggars, and now they're in jail. 7. Tesla killer. A Tesla employee got into an argument with his coworker in the parking lot of the company's Fremont factory. Anthony Solima was so fed up with Lee Brazier that at the end of his shift, he shot and killed the man. Anthony waited for him in the parking lot. As Lee tried to get into his vehicle, Anthony blasted him. Anthony tried to make an escape, but he was caught the next day. Authorities have been unable to get a specific motive out of Anthony, who's trying to maintain his innocence. But according to other co-workers, his desire to kill Lee Brazier probably began that morning. The two had gotten into such a heated argument that Anthony quit the job and loaded his stuff into his vehicle. He was seen leaving the parking lot, but he came back just before quitting time and waited for his opportunity. According to a probable cause court statement, it's believed Anthony waited at just the right vantage so that he could see Lee as he was getting into his vehicle. Before Lee could even turn the key to open his car door, Anthony blew his brains out the front of his face with an AR-15. If convicted, Anthony will get life in prison with no possibility of parole. He may even get the death penalty since he sat and waited to shoot Lee Brazier with every intention of killing him. 6. Lynched. A man who was on a camping trip with an old co-worker was fatally shot and killed in rural Pennsylvania. Relatives of the victim have called his death a modern lynching. They're frustrated that only a few people have been detained and no one has been arrested or charged with murder. Here's what happened. Peter Bernardo Spencer was shot several times at a residence on December 12th. 4 people who were there at the time were questioned and then released after consulting with the district attorney. It's still going to take more time for the police to get ballistic data, toxicology, and other lab results. What we know beyond a doubt is that somebody shot and killed Peter. It started at around 2:30 in the morning, with Peter taking at least 9 bullets to his back. Peter was an immigrant from Jamaica and the only person in the camping trip with dark skin. His relatives believe he was brought on the camping trip specifically so that he could be lynched and killed. It was his former colleague who dreamed up the whole scenario, allegedly. However, the police have completely stonewalled the public and won't tell anyone anything. We don't have any answers other than that Peter, lured into rural Pennsylvania by a man he trusted and once worked with, was brutally killed. He was shot nearly a dozen times in the back as if by a firing squad. What's your take on this terrifying murder? Was it a premeditated slaughter or did something go horribly wrong during the camping trip? Let us know your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to hit subscribe before the end of the video. 5. Killed before her wedding. Annie Lee was an exceptional young woman with a smile known to light up a room. She was 24 years old, an academic star, and on her way to earning herself a doctorate at Yale University. She was also 5 days away from getting married when she went missing from the campus lab in 2009. Her corpse was discovered a few days later when the police noticed the stench of a decomposing body. And even though her killer was captured and convicted, the truth behind Annie's death remains a mystery to this very day. She vanished on September 8th. Security camera footage showed her entering the building at 10 o'clock in the morning, but never captured her leaving. Bloody clothes were found in the ceiling on September 12th. On the 13th was when cops smelled the decomposing corpse. They brought in cadaver dogs and found her body stuffed inside a wall, upside down. It was the same day she was supposed to be walking down the aisle. According to an unidentified police source, she had been crushed in the wall and was like mush. She was so smashed that the police couldn't recognize her as a person. The medical examiner determined that she died from asphyxiation by neck compression. Her jaw was broken, her collarbone was broken, and she had been sexually violated. It turned out that one of her colleagues in the lab, another technician named Ray Clark, killed her in the most violent and degrading way possible. He was given a prison sentence of 44 years, but to this day, he's never given a motive for why he did it. 4. Mass killer Michael McDermott. Every week for almost a decade, Michael McDermott drove over 1 hour to the city of Dedham, Massachusetts to donate blood. He gave out of his own volition, receiving no payment. He even had a sticker on his bumper, "Give blood." Ask anyone who knew him, he was a pretty ordinary guy and not someone who would have a mental breakdown and shoot everyone at work. But that's exactly what happened. The morning after Christmas in the year 2000, Michael went into Edgewater Technology where he wrote code for the company software. He talked to one of his co-workers about video games. Then, at about 11 o'clock in the morning, he walked into the lobby with an AK-47, a shotgun, and a pistol. One of his colleagues asked where he was going with that. He answered, "Human Resources." When Michael arrived at Human Resources, he shot 2 of the employees at reception and continued down the hall. From here, he started picking off people as he saw them. He killed 3, kept on going to accounting, and blasted through the door and gunned down 2 more people. Absolutely nobody saw the horror coming. It was completely random, at least from the outside. When the dust had settled and 7 people were dead, investigators tried to figure out a motive. They believe it probably had to do with money. Human Resources were garnishing his wages to pay overdue taxes that he owed to the IRS. He was broke. He felt like he was spinning on a treadmill with nowhere to go, and he took out his frustration on the people at work. The poor, innocent people who were just doing their jobs. 3. Lockheed Martin shooting spree. On July 8, 2003, the Lockheed Martin plant in Meridian, Mississippi fell victim to a violent gunman. Douglas Williams was an assembly line worker at the plant who went completely insane and shot 14 of his co-workers with a shotgun. 6 of them died, but the rest luckily survived. Not only was this a horrifying shooting, but it was motivated by racial prejudice. 5 out of the 6 that died during the incident were African American, and it was no coincidence. At the time, this was the deadliest workplace shooting in the United States since December of 2000, when a man named Michael McDermott brutally slaughtered 7 of his co-workers. It was also described as the worst hate crime since the Civil Rights Movement. On the day of the shooting, Douglas was attending a mandatory ethics and diversity class. According to colleagues at the plant, he already had a history of making threats and racist comments. The threats were always aimed at his African American coworkers. While Douglas was at the ethics and diversity class, others noted him as being agitated more than usual. He stayed at the meeting for just a few minutes, had an ordinary conversation with one of his colleagues, and then stormed out of the room. The last thing he said to anyone was, "I'll take matters into my own hands." Douglas went to his pickup truck, grabbed a few guns, and walked back into the room. He shouted profanities and then started unloading. It was indiscriminate chaos, with co-workers being shot in the face, the hands, the back, and everywhere else. He eventually left that room and headed to the main factory, where he continued his deadly rampage. It lasted all of just 10 minutes. 2. Murder for hire. Johnny Wright Jr. and Shariat Burks are awaiting trial for the homicide of a man named Adan Farid Khatami. The victim was shot to death in his vehicle as he was stopped at an intersection back in July. But the killers weren't the ones behind the assassination. It was Takesha Upshaw, a woman from California, who hired the duo to take out a business partner. Alameda County Sheriff Sergeant Ray Kelly called it a sinister and elaborate plot. Takesha and Adan had been in the marijuana growing business together. They were partners, more or less. When they started having problems, Takesha reached out to a third party to connect her to the hitman. Johnny and Shariat are from Tennessee, over 2,000 miles away. Hiring hitmen from out of town was supposed to help throw the police off everyone's trail, but it didn't work. The cops figured everything out, and every single person involved has been arrested. even in a business like growing marijuana for distributors, a disagreement between co-workers can end up deadly. 1. The Lear plant shooting. A woman in Tuscaloosa was given 50 years in prison after she murdered her co-worker at the Lear Corporation plant. Her name is Angela Mayo, guilty of killing a 27-year-old mother named Shanina Smith. They were both employed at the corporation, both working the night shift. Deputies were called when the shooting started, and when they arrived, they discovered Smith dead on the floor. She had been filled with bullets and bled out before help could arrive. When the police questioned Angela as to her motive, it was pretty weak. She claimed that she killed Shanina Smith because she was continuously brushing up against her for the past 8 months. They worked side by side at the assembly line, and apparently Shanina was always accidentally bumping against Angela. But she never said anything, instead chewing on her irritation until it got so bad that she brought a gun to work. On the assembly line, she pulled that gun out and shot Smith 3 times in the face. When Smith fell to the floor, Angela shot her a few more times for good measure. 9. William Hudson. In late 2015, Hannah Johnson and her boyfriend, Thomas Camp, took a family camping trip on some land they had recently bought in Tennessee County, Texas. They were joined by Thomas's 2 adult sons, Nathan and Austin, Hannah's parents, Carl and Cynthia, and her 6-year-old son, Cade. Little did they know, the previous landowner, William Hudson, was angry that they had purchased the property, and he was waiting for the perfect moment to get his revenge. Hannah and her parents stayed behind at the campsite while the 4 other campers went to get some firewood. Hudson shot and killed them all, then tossed their bodies into a pond in his yard. He then went to the campsite where he fatally shot Hannah, then shot Carl and beat them to death. Hannah's mother, Cynthia, hid behind some chairs until dawn and then sought help. She was the only survivor. Cynthia testified in court that she could hear Carl asking Hudson why he was hurting them and saying that he thought they were friends. She heard the 2 fighting inside the camper, then watched terrified as Hudson came outside, vomited, and went near her hiding spot, making her think that she would be his next victim. Instead, he sat down and drank a beer, then went back inside and finished murdering Carl. Cynthia said that Hudson had been unpleasant but helpful toward the family during a previous encounter when they got their truck and camper stuck in the mud. He had also volunteered to help the first 4 victims collect firewood the night he murdered them. When the group that stayed behind heard gunfire, they assumed the men were just having fun. Little did they know Hudson was headed their way next. A jury found Hudson guilty of 3 counts of capital murder. He was sentenced to death by lethal injection. 8. A decades-old double murder. David Schuldes and his fiancée, Ellen Matthews, were shot dead while camping in Silver Cliff, Wisconsin during the summer of 1976. The killer shot David in the neck before sexually assaulting Ellen and firing 2 bullets into the woman's chest. Sadly, the case went cold and remained unsolved for decades, while police did their best to try figuring out who murdered the young couple. During the 1990s, investigators uploaded DNA evidence recovered from the scene to a law enforcement database called the Combined DNA Index System, or CODIS. Unfortunately, no matches turned up. In 2018, detectives revisited the case using a groundbreaking technique known as genetic genealogy, which involves identifying suspects through any DNA that their relatives have voluntarily submitted to a genealogy database. This enabled investigators to narrow down their pool of suspects to 4 brothers. whom they watched until they saw an opportunity to secretly collect DNA samples from. Raymond van Nieuwenhoven was the third brother that the police visited. They pretended that they were doing a survey, which they then asked him to fill out and place in a sealed envelope. The 82-year-old saliva turned out to be a genetic match to the killer. He was arrested in 2019, nearly 43 years after the murders. Van Nieuwenhoven maintained his innocence, but as far as the jury was concerned, DNA doesn't lie. He was convicted of killing David and Ellen and will spend the rest of his life behind bars. 7. A fatal family gathering. Nobody expected the night to end in bloodshed when Miles Jones accompanied his girlfriend to a family retreat at a Bucks County campground in 2019. But things quickly turned deadly when the couple got into an argument. The irate boyfriend was found trying to flip over his tent with his girlfriend inside while she screamed for help. He reportedly warned other partygoers that nobody was safe and that they were all going to pay. 41-year-old Eric Braxton and 46-year-old Arthur Hill intervened in an attempt to calm things down, but Jones decided to take the altercation to the next level. He pulled out a gun and fatally shot both men. Deputy District Attorney Edward Luca described the horrifying crime as two senseless killings that didn't have to happen and were completely unjustified. The defendant's attorney argued that Jones acted in self-defense after being beaten by other guests. He claimed that he was terrified for his life and had no way to get home from the unfamiliar place he was in, but his defense wasn't convincing enough to get him off the hook for his crimes. Jones was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder, 13 counts of reckless endangerment, carrying an unlicensed firearm, and possession of a crime instrument. Prosecutors originally sought the death penalty, but a judge sentenced him to 2 consecutive life terms. 6. Ryan O Carroll. In 2018, a 25-year-old entrepreneur named Ryan O Carroll decided to camp at Tahiti County Park in Cornwall, England. But the trip was over before it really even began, and it ended in the worst imaginable way. While setting up his tent, a tree came crashing down and crushed the young man to death in what can only be described as a tragic freak accident. He was securing the hammock-like shelter between 2 trees and put too much strain on one of them as he tightened the strap. Ryan's wife and brother were there to witness the disturbing tragedy. Horrified onlookers said that the tree looked a bit rotten, but it didn't look like it was going to fall. The accident happened during an especially dry season, leaving the tree without enough moisture and possibly dead. Natalie Jupp, who was nearby when the tree fell, told the Daily Mail that the severity of what happened needed to be highlighted, presumably to raise awareness about the potential dangers of camping in the type of tent that Ryan was using. 5. Lake Bodom murders. Back in 1960, 4 Finnish teenagers decided to go camping outside of the capital of Helsinki along Lake Bodom. The group consisted of 2 15-year-old girls named Mela Bjorklund and Anja Maki, and 2 18-year-old men named Seppo Boisman and Niels Gustafsson. During the early hours of the morning, an unknown assailant bludgeoned and stabbed both girls and Boisman to death while they slept in their tent. Gustafsson was also attacked, but lived. He was found outside the tent with stab wounds and broken facial bones. The lone survivor told police that he saw someone dressed all in black with bright red eyes. A group of boys reported seeing a blonde male near the collapsed tent during the early morning hours. The murder weapons were never found, and the killer's identity remains a mystery to this day. Numerous items were missing, including the keys to the victims' motorcycles, which were left at the site. Gustafsson's shoes were found partially hidden more than 1,600 feet from the tent. Unfortunately, police failed to properly preserve the crime scene and the evidence was disturbed. While it's hard to say whether they would have solved the crime if they had been more careful, a more organized investigation may have revealed important details about the massacre that went unnoticed. Police arrested Gustafsson in 2004 on suspicion of the murders, but he was not found guilty. There are a few other suspects, but not enough evidence to charge anyone. 4. Sarah Colin. Police in Conifer, Colorado responded to a report of a shooting late last year and found a man dead inside a camper. The suspect, 36-year-old Sarah Ann Colin, fled the scene in a pickup truck in the middle of the night, but police were quick to catch up with her. They charged her with first-degree murder, menacing, and for having a weapon in her possession as a previous offender. Colin indeed had numerous run-ins with the law before that night, with a criminal record dating back to 2003. In 2006, she was charged with 2 counts of attempted murder, menacing and firing a gun while drunk in Colorado Springs. She was convicted on 2 counts of assault with a deadly weapon and served a 6-year prison sentence. Then in 2014, a judge sentenced Colin to 2 years of probation for felony menacing. But she couldn't seem to follow the rules and ended up spending 90 days in jail after having her probation revoked. She spent another 60 days in jail in 2017 for assault and resisting arrest. If Colin is convicted of the charges she currently faces, she will likely receive her longest prison sentence yet. 3. Russell Hill and Carol Clay. 74-year-old Russell Hill was an experienced outdoorsman, so it was odd when he and his 73-year-old girlfriend, Carol Clay, never returned from a camping trip in Australia's Victorian Alps in 2020. Other campers found Hill's vehicle at the couple's burned-out campsite, but the pair were nowhere to be found. The investigation has been slow going, but police revealed late last year that they had found a crime scene and were hopeful that the missing couple's remains would turn up. It was around the same time that police arrested a 55-year-old pilot named Greg Lynn at a remote campsite. By then, the suspect had sold his trailer, which detectives believe could hold important clues about the victims' fates. After more than 20 months of investigating, police found charred human remains that they believe belonged to Hill and Clay. They're currently awaiting DNA testing results to confirm the identities of the deceased. It appears as though the killer burned the couple's bodies and then dumped them into a densely wooded area. Detectives are withholding a lot of the details about what else they found as the investigation continues. If convicted of the murders, Lynn could spend the rest of his life in prison. 2. Maria Madrid. Maria Madrid was a 38-year-old mother who had migrated to the U.S. from Mexico when she was in her mid-20s. She settled down in Colorado with her husband, Eliseo, and had a son. As they prepared to go home after a picnic along the Colorado River in 2005, a man from a neighboring campsite accused them of not picking up their garbage. He pulled out a handgun and began shooting at their vehicle as Eliseo tried driving away. Maria died in the attack. A few days later, a concerned onlooker notified the Eagle County Sheriff's Office about a suspicious-looking man they had seen walking along the river, who matched the description of the suspect in Maria's murder. Deputies arrested 55-year-old Charles Anthony Gross, who was living in a camper attached to his truck at the time. Maria had told her husband that the man gave her a bad feeling shortly before she was killed. The unemployed construction worker, who blamed immigrants for stealing his job, allegedly admitted to killing the woman in a fit of rage. A jury convicted Gross of murder in 2007, and he was sentenced to life plus 100 years. He's challenged his case numerous times and was even granted a new trial in 2010, but the charges stuck. Gross tried to get another new trial in 2017, claiming that his lawyers misrepresented him, but he remains behind bars for now. 1. The Cowden Family Murders. Richard and Belinda Cowden vanished over Labor Day weekend in 1974 along with their kids, David and Melissa, during a family camping trip in Oregon's Siskiyou Mountains. The father and son were the last family members to be seen when they went to a general store to buy milk around 9 o'clock in the morning on September 1st. When the Cowdens failed to arrive at Belinda's mother's home for dinner later that day, she went to their campsite to see if everything was okay. All their belongings were there, but the family was nowhere to be found. Belinda's mother panicked and went to the police, but because there were no outward signs of violence, they held off on starting an investigation until the next day. The following morning, the family's dog showed up at the general store. The Cowdens' disappearance sparked one of the largest search efforts in the state's history, as the baffling case made national headlines. 7 months later, a pair of gold prospectors found their remains roughly 7 miles from the campsite. Belinda and David had died from gunshot wounds to the head, and Melissa died from severe head trauma. Richard's cause of death is unknown, but detectives believe that he died at the site along with his family. No murder weapon was ever found. Serial rapist and murderer Dwayne Lee Little remains a top suspect to this day, but he was never charged in the Cowden family's deaths.
Number 10. Incoming. On the 3rd of December 2017, in Purworejo, Indonesia, 16-year-old Ellie Hayati got hit by an oncoming train while she and her friends were trying to take selfies together. Ellie and her friends had been walking near the tracks when they decided to commemorate the moment. They could see and hear a train coming, and figured capturing it moving behind them would be pretty cool. Well, it did not end in a cool way. One of the pictures shows Ellie the exact moment she was hit, while her friends were laughing, not realizing that their BFF had just been hit by the train. When Ellie was hit by the train, she fell onto the stone slab next to the track, which cracked her skull open. When her friends realized she'd been hit, they started panicking and screaming for help. Residents living nearby heard the screams and came running. When they saw what happened, they called the ambulance. Ellie was rushed to the hospital, where her scalp had to be sewn back together. Fortunately, she survived the accident, but it's unclear if she had any long-term brain damage or injuries. It also wasn't clarified if the girls were taking pictures in a restricted area or not. Number 9. Waterfall. On December 21st, 2020, a Brazilian man slipped from a waterfall to his death while trying to take a selfie. The 22-year-old Guilherme Chiapetti fell over 32 feet and landed on rocks at the Cachoeira da Onça in South Brazil. His skull cracked like an egg. After he fell, Chiapetti was immediately rushed to the hospital. However, he died a day later in the hospital due to severe head injuries. This wasn't the first time Guilherme Chiapetti came to this particular waterfall. According to his father, he enjoyed photography and went to Cachoeira da Onça to take pictures regularly. His aunt was left devastated and said she would have hugged him one more time if she knew that was the last time she was going to see him. Number 8. Selfie obsessed. On May 12, 2015, a Romanian teenager caught on fire after she accidentally touched a live wire while trying to take the ultimate selfie. Anna Ursa and her friends decided to go to their nearest train station to take a selfie to post on Facebook. For some reason, they wanted this selfie to be special, and they insisted the train station was the perfect spot. When she went to the top of the train, they were swinging their legs in the air when an overhead wire sent over 27,000 volts through her body. The intense shock sparked a fire, and in no time at all, Anna was ablaze. The charge from the wire that hit Anna was so powerful that her friend was knocked off the roof of the train from the impact as well. A man saw this accident and risked his own life trying to save Anna and her friend. He managed to extinguish most of the fire himself before calling the ambulance for help. He had actually already warned the teenagers to stop playing on the train before the accident, but clearly they didn't listen. The young girls ended up being airlifted to the nearest hospital. However, Anna died soon after, since more than half of her body was covered in severe burns. The 17-year-old girl with Anna managed to survive and made a full recovery. She told the police that they were trying to take the ultimate selfie and didn't think anything dangerous could happen. Boy, were they mistaken. Number 7. Long Way Down. On November 12, 2017, a New Zealander woman living in London fell 2 stories from her window while trying to take a selfie. The woman was identified as 20-year-old Toni Kelly. She was known for documenting her travels through pictures and sharing them online for all her Instagram followers to see. After falling 2 stories from her window, she suffered a severe brain injury. Kelly ended up passing away just 2 days later. Her family was extremely shocked by the news of the accident, with her aunt saying that her parents are totally devastated. Kelly's fans on social media made tributes for her and shared their condolences with her family. Since Kelly was actually traveling in London at the time, her family started a fundraiser so they could get enough money to bring her remains back home. The fundraiser managed to raise over $38,000. Kelly was an organ donor, and her organs will be used in the UK to help save other lives. Number 6. The disastrous happy selfie. On November 15, 2017, there was an accident at the Andwy Expressway. 18 people died from the accident, while more than 20 people were left badly injured. Apparently, more than 30 different cars had collided with each other. Not only that, but the cars ended up bursting into flames. Why did this happen though? Was someone texting and driving? No, there was extreme fog that day and it was extremely difficult to see. While all of this was happening, a local reporter was spotted taking selfies at the scene of the crime while smiling. She worked for Fuyang Radio. She took multiple pictures of herself in front of the burnt cars while showing off her new badge. She wasn't the only one taking happy pictures. She also had a man who was also in a uniform taking selfies with her. She posted the pictures on her Weibo account, which obviously ended up triggering a bunch of people. People are calling her out on being happy, while 18 people died. Others said they hoped Andwy will teach her a lesson. After receiving so much backlash, the reporter later uploaded a video that evening, apologizing for all her actions. She said that she sincerely apologizes and said that what she did was very wrong. On November 16th, Fuyang Traffic Radio put out a statement on social media. They disapproved of the reporter's behavior and announced that she'd been terminated. Apparently, this isn't the first time someone had been taking a very happy photo at the scene of a crime. Back in 2012, a Shaanxi official took selfies of himself laughing at a traffic collision that took the life of 36 people. The official was actually corrupt and was exposed by people online, who researched his background after he posted the pictures. Number 5. The impossible survival. On January 21st, 2018, a man was hit on the head by a train while he was trying to take some selfies on the train tracks. What is it with people wanting to take selfies near moving trains? Apparently, the man had already been warned by multiple staff members to not take pictures so close to the tracks. The 25-year-old was later identified as T. Siva, who was a resident of Hyderabad, India. Fortunately, he wasn't actually run over by the train, but he was hit by it, which caused him to fall away from it. He ended up getting a pretty bad injury on the side of his head and was rushed to the hospital. After he received emergency treatment, he was quickly taken to the Railway Protection Force, where a case was registered against him for violating the Railway Act, which basically means he gets punished for trespassing to take pictures at railway tracks. The law was set in motion because people kept putting their lives at risk on the tracks. If they make it out of the incident alive, they have to face the law. Number 4. Slip and fall. On July 4th, 2019, a man slipped and fell over 150 feet, 46 meters, from a rock while he was trying to take a selfie of himself near a waterfall. The victim, who was later identified as Satish, survived but suffered a serious injury to the head. He was said to have slipped because it had just rained and the rocks were a bit slippery. The incident took place at Bidirutala, near the Chamari Ghat stretch of the National Highway, connecting Dakshina Kannada. People near the waterfall were actually taking videos and photos too, but they were on the ground instead of being at the top of the rocks, trying to get a shot of the entire waterfall. While doing so, some people accidentally took pictures of Satish falling. You can see him tumbling down in the background. The pictures quickly went viral. That impossibility of someone accidentally falling off the waterfall became real all over again. Number 3. Fatal mistake. On the 3rd of January 2021, a woman in Odisha, India was trying to take a selfie near a river. There was a man next to her, also trying to take a selfie. However, he lost his balance and slipped. And unfortunately for the woman next to him, he took her down with him. The woman, later identified as Nirupama Prajapati, had actually managed to hold on for a while, but slipped a few seconds later. Apparently, the water was rushing so fast that there was basically no way for her to have survived the water. After she fell into the river, the fire department, along with the woman's family, spent over 22 hours trying to find her body. She was later found in a stone cavity in deep water 1,300 feet away from where she fell. India actually holds the records for the highest number of people to die from selfie-related accidents, with over 259 deaths so far. It's gotten so bad that India has actually had to set up no selfie zones around dangerous areas, with 16 of them being in Mumbai alone. Number 2. Swept away. On January 28, 2020, a 21-year-old tourist, Zhu Jinyue, was swept away by the waves in Bali while she was trying to take the ultimate selfie. She was at the Devil's Tier with her partner and a few other friends. It's a popular place for tourists, but it can also be a very dangerous place. There have been accidents there before. The Chinese tourist had actually climbed over the security fence to go to the Indonesian island of Nusa Lembongan so she could take the photos of herself. Those fences are there for a reason. The police head of Klungkung AKP Putugeda Ardana informed the media outlets that the woman had fallen into the waters from the Devil's Tier and was swept away by the strong currents. She didn't die from the fall, but actually died from drowning. Zhu Jinyue was already dead by the time people were trying to alert the staff of her body floating in the ocean. People were extremely distressed and screamed, "Someone help her!" Her husband in particular panicked after he saw her fall into the water and was asking others to help her. However, no one actually did, since the scenic spot was known for being extremely dangerous. Instead, they waited for the emergency crew to come by boat and save the woman. Once the rescue team had managed to get her body out of the water, she was pronounced dead on the scene. The head of the Klungkung Tourism Office, Nenga Sukasta, told the news outlets that he wanted to see tour guides paying more attention towards tourists. He also said that they should be educating visitors and telling them which spots are dangerous and aren't. Right before the incident, the authorities had installed the fence along the coastline, since many people had almost died at the same spot. Number 1. A live one. On the 16th of December 2020, a 13-year-old boy was burnt alive after he and his friends decided to touch an overhead wire while taking some selfies. The teenager, who was identified as P. Surya, was on top of a train in Bhubaneswar, India. Apparently, the teenagers had snuck into the coach area when the beat constable wasn't there. When they thought they'd be caught, they snuck out and climbed on top of the train, thinking they'd be safe there. This might sound a little strange at first, but sitting on top of trains is actually pretty common in India. People even hang off trains and just hold on for dear life, hoping that they'll make it to the destination. Most people actually make it to the destination, which is why people keep climbing on top of them. But there are a lot of people that don't make it. Some fall off, others get hit by structures that they drive past, and some face a fate that's even worse, just like this teenager did. When the kids got on top of the train, they decided that they were going to take a selfie to remember the day. But while they were doing that, the train passed under some live wires, and P. Surya accidentally touched it. When he touched the overhead wire, he was instantly electrocuted, which sent 25,000 volts through his body and burnt him alive. More than 80% of P. Surya's body was covered in burns. His friend survived with minor burns while trying to save him. The roof of the coach also caught on fire and had to be put out by firefighters. The three were immediately taken to the hospital, where P. Surya died, while his other friends only got minor injuries, which were treated right away. Thanks for watching. Which of these do you think was the worst? Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed it, be sure to hit subscribe for more. See you next time. Bye!